Well, yet again, we are less than a week away from when U.S. President Donald Trump says he'll hit Canada with a 25% tariff. Today, the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee met to discuss a response to the threat on tariffs starting this Saturday.
This is our #1 priority, and we're working at it every day. Now, we believe that diplomacy can work, and that's why we're having private conversations, but meanwhile, there's still a lot of work. This administration in the U.S. is very unpredictable, so we have to be ready and working on both fronts. Like I was saying, preventing tariffs and at the same time working on our resistance.
Despite Canada's efforts, Trump has not indicated any change in his decision to impose tariffs and has instead been doubling down in his assertion that the United States does not need Canadian goods.
We lose $200 billion a year with Canada. That's because we allow them to make cars, we allow them to take lumber. We don't need their cars, we don't need their lumber, we don't need their food products because we make the same products right on the other side of the border. They've been very nasty to us on trade. Historically, Canada has been very, very bad to us, very unfair to us on trade. So we'll see how it all works out.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith joins me now. Premier, it's good to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, David.
So Donald Trump's changed the date, but he doesn't seem to have changed his mind. What's your sense of where things stand going into February 1st?
Well, I think we have to be prepared for tariffs. I've been saying that for some time. I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. There are obviously some irritations in the Canada-U.S. relationship that I think that the U.S. president hasn't felt we've fully addressed. He likes tariffs for their own sake as a way of generating revenue. I think he's concerned about us still not meeting our NATO commitment, and I think there are still some concerns about the border policy. So I think that we have to engage in some deep negotiations to figure out if we can find out exactly what it would take to be able to take tariffs off the table. But the language that we're hearing, it suggests to me that we do have to prepare for something on February 1st.
But, you know, you've been saying to the Americans you're speaking with and people close to Trump, you need our oil. If you don't have our oil, gas prices are going to go up. We should double exports. Then he goes to the World Economic Forum and says, we don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody. So how do you view that? I mean, do you see that as a statement of belief by the president, or is that negotiating? How do you view that as Premier of Alberta?
Well, we've got a lot of resource in Alberta. We've got a trillion barrels of oil, of which 200 billion are recoverable. We've got 500 trillion cubic feet of gas. And so I think we might be in contention for being one of the top jurisdictions for oil and gas. The Americans, I think, aspirationally want to be independent, but I think the reality is that they consume 21 million barrels a day of oil. They produce 13 million barrels a day of oil. They've got to get the balance from somewhere. Our particular brand of heavy oil that the refineries are configured for, you can only get that brand from places like Venezuela and Iran as alternatives. So I think it's important for us to continue to make that case. In addition, I think that, and the case I've been making, is that we can assist the Americans in achieving energy dominance. For them to be able to keep on exporting, they need someone to backfill for their own citizens so that prices don't spike. I don't know that I had the breakthrough yet, but I'm certainly continuing to make that case.
But when he says we don't need their oil and gas, I mean, whether he's right or wrong, who knows? He's the president, and he's decided that this is a course he's willing to go down. I mean, what does that mean to Canada if he follows through on that statement?
It would be immediate, but we would have to figure out how we would get more of our product to market if we don't have the opportunity of going through America, or if America is not interested in building additional pipelines. And that means that we've got to restart some of the conversations we've had in the past about a pipeline to the east, Energy East, or some other route, so that we can make sure that our friends in Eastern Canada are not 100% reliant on American oil and gas as they are right now. And we need to make sure that we get a pipeline to British Columbia so that we can support our friends internationally, particularly in Asia. So I think those are a couple of the conversations that we need to have. I think tearing down internal trade barriers, finding out what can we buy from each other that we may no longer be able to source from the United States. That's probably a constructive conversation to have. And those are the things that we've got to be preparing for if it is indeed a complete change in the relationship that we've historically enjoyed with the U.S.
You know, finding new markets, building new pipelines, years, right? Even if approved today, just the building and the doing of it would take years. The shock of a tariff hit, and would also limit the ability of industry inside Canada to build those pipelines because of the financial damage it would do. So the people are applying different motivations to the president. It's the 2%, it's the border, but one that you touched on seems to be gaining more steam is just tariffs for their own sake. That it's about revenue. That's a fundamentally different conversation than a bargaining chip, because that's a total restructuring of the North American economy. What's your sense of that? How do you overcome that one?
Well, it's a difficult one. I mean, if you read Robert Lighthizer book,
Yep.
No Trade is Free, one of the chapters he has on is that expressing the irritation of the administration over national sales taxes. So we have actually a pretty small one. It's only 5%. But in Europe, their national sales taxes are over 20%. And I think the administration looks at that as a barrier to their goods. It protects internal domestic produced goods, but then they're able to sell into the American market without having that additional tax. So I think he's looking at a tariff as being almost like a border adjustment tax. And if that is the case, that's going to be painful for Canada because we have enjoyed a tariff-free relationship with the United States. I don't think we should be defeatist, though. I mean, we do have a lot of products that you can put on a train or on a container ship, and you can find new markets. We have a ton of critical minerals that everybody in the world wants, and we have the ability to get those supply chains to market. It may mean that we have to have a serious look at the security of our ports and our rail lines and our airlines, because we've had a lot of shutdowns in the last couple of years, and have a conversation with the unions about how we can maintain those being open so that we don't end up compromising our ability to export internationally. But I think that those are good conversations for us to have, and we should be having them anyway, regardless of what the Americans decide to do.
But premiers, you and others look at what is it that Canada can do to sort of give Trump the win that people seem to think he's looking for, that could stave off some sort of a trade action against the country. If it is tariffs for their own sake, is there anything Canada can do to stop him, if that's what he wants?
It's a good question. I think we can probably make the case. I've gone back and looked at President McKinley, who I think the U.S. president admires. And one of the things that McKinley, he loved tariffs, but you know what he didn't tariff? He didn't tariff raw materials. And the reason for that is because I think that there was a recognition that you need a good supply of cheap raw materials in order to do the value added, to create the jobs, in order to create the valuable products. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to have that conversation that food imports, they should be exempted. Oil and gas and critical minerals and timber, all of that should be exempted.
But auto sector, other manufacturing, all of, yeah, sure. But I mean, that's that's a continuation of the existing relationship, right? And he seems intent on disrupting that. Well, yeah, no, I hear you. And status quo will be better than what he's contemplating. But if he is determined to put in a tariff to generate revenue for whatever need he has domestically, that just lowers the chance of a Team Canada success in whatever form it takes.
I don't know if it will be, because look at what just happened in the last 24 hours in Colombia. Colombia, he threatened to slap on a 25% tariff. And what did he want in return? He wanted them to agree to accept the deportees that he was sending. And when they finally agreed, he took the tariff threat off the table. So that's why I'm saying that we've got a president that we have to find out what exactly it is he's looking for from Canada. I don't know that we've gotten to that yet. I think you get there by having diplomacy and negotiation, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a breakthrough there.
Okay, the Team Canada approach, I want to get your sense of where that is right now. Because my understanding is you'll probably have another First Ministers meeting with the Prime Minister on Wednesday. It seems like that's going to be a weekly thing. And you've heard the criticism that you're freelancing, you're the outlier here. Steve Verhoeven, who was one of Canada's main negotiators on NAFTA last time, said that you're essentially undermining Canada's negotiating abilities by sort of refusing to get on board with the all options around the table line. Where do you think things stand right now, Premier?
I think that we still do have a very constructive Council of the Federation table. We'll be meeting weekly. I'm going to be meeting with both Dominic LeBlanc and Jonathan Wilkinson this week. And my personal view is that you don't talk about these retaliation measures in public. You plan for the worst, but you hope for the best, and you lead with diplomacy. I think we have to wait and see what the Americans do. Are they going to do 25% across the board February 1st? Are they going to do any carve-outs? Are they going going to identify particular trade irritants? Or are they going to drop it altogether, knowing that we still have an election to go through and a permanent mandate to give to a new prime minister? I don't know any of those things. The factors, in my view, are we can plan for those things, but we can't really know what our response is going to be until we see the Americans' first move. We don't want to be the first mover on this. We want to try to avoid the fight. And so if we can do that, great. And if not, then we'll have to make the judgment at that time.
Look, I come from a resource-dependent province as well that's very trade exposed to the U.S. right now. So you can understand the Premier of Alberta and your motivation in terms of sticking up for your core industries. But in the terms of not putting it on the table, by you demanding that something is off the table, I mean, this is what Mr. Vilhoul points to, saying that this undermines Canada's negotiating position if you can't say every sector of the Canadian economy can be weaponized against the U.S. Are you worried that in sticking up for your province, you could be undermining the ability of the country to deal with the U.S. in this?
I think Eastern Canada has to be very, very careful what they wish for, because as I said, they get almost all of their energy from the United States, and they've got a pretty big stick. I certainly don't think that wouldn't want to see Ontario or Quebec or the Irving refinery cut off from American oil or imports. So that's why I'm saying you just don't threaten things that you're not prepared to do, or where the retaliation measure might leave you worse off. It's one thing to talk about an import tax on orange juice, and maybe we'll all end up paying a little bit more for orange juice. That's a Team Canada approach, but you shouldn't put things on the table that would be harmful to the country as a whole. So let's try to find the things that we can all live with, and then see if we have to act on them. But I think we have to have a bit of a reality check about just how dependent Eastern Canada is on U.S. energy imports, and why it's a flawed strategy to try to talk about retaliating there.
But just as a final point of that, you say be careful what they wish for. I mean, I don't get the sense there's any eagerness to do any of this, right? This is all kind of last resort stuff, that if he does this, the country needs to be prepared for that. I mean, do you get the sense the federal government and the other provinces are keen to use Alberta energy to wage economic warfare with the U.S.? Because they did talk about no sector, no region suffering undue burden. They would be supported if it happened that way. I mean, did that not reassure you at all there?
Oh, I'm reassured. We're continuing to have the conversation, and I guess we'll see what happens if tariffs do come in. I think it's pretty standard that you see, if there is a tariff war, that you identify other products that are being imported for similar types of action, and it's proportional, and that'd be the kind of thing that I would be looking for. But I think we have to wait and see what the Americans do first. And sounding like a broken record, try to avoid it altogether. We can't really win a tariff war against an economy that's 10 times our size. I think we also have to be realistic about how much pressure we can add there. And if there are other things that are causing this tension in the trade relationship, those are the things that we should be working on very hard to address.
Well, Premier, some of the other premiers may disagree with you on a lot of things, but on the let's avoid it altogether, I'm pretty sure they're with you on that one. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, always appreciate the time. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, David.